Hello, everyone. We're going to, give it a few moments while numbers are climbing as people are starting to join the webinar. My name is Bree Sprague. I am the Partner Success Manager for RevGenius, and we are so excited today to have this amazing webinar with Nick Sproul of Second Nature and David Zeff of Whistle. And, what they're going to be sharing today is so beneficial to everyone who's participating on this call, looking at how you can maximize your current SDR team. I'm excited to learn more about the tips and tricks, and in particular, that SDR cheat code that you have. And a little housekeeping item for anyone who's joining us. If you have to hop out later, just go ahead and send me an email, bree@revgenius.com, and I will happily make sure you get access to the recording of this. With that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to the gentleman and give people just a moment or two to continue hopping on. Thanks so much.
Awesome. So thanks, Bree. Hello, everybody. I'm David. Nice to meet you all. I might start, let me maybe start by sharing my screen here. Make sure the technicals are working. All right, thanks to the good folk at Canva. All right, let's jump in. So everybody, Nick and I are going to be walking you guys through maximizing the potential of your current SDR team. Today, we're going to cover some key topics, right? Education versus training. What does that really mean? How to improve confidence and competence in sellers from an early start, and the SDR cheat code, what the best SDRs do differently. Very quick intro about me and why you should care about what I have to say. So you heard my name enough times, but I'm CEO at a company called Whistle. We have run over 600 different SDR campaigns for around 70 tech companies over the last 2 years. We, as a result, we've really honed in what to do and best practice. We work currently with a team of 80 SDRs, and we're a company approaching about 100 people. So a couple of things here. Sorry, guys. Ooh, going backwards. Okay, a couple of things here. Education versus training. And I wanted to start with a little bit of a story just to kind of illustrate the difference between the two. So this time last year, exactly this time last year, I took my family to Disneyland. And it was an amazing experience. But while I was at Disneyland, I couldn't help but notice how everything was running so smoothly. In fact, if a train is set to leave at a specific time, it's never late. The parade is always at where it's supposed to be, when it's supposed to be. The performances are always on point. The interesting thing is that the process seems to run effortlessly, really. But if you're in management or leadership, you know that in order for things to run effortlessly, there has to be a lot of work involved. And that was where my mind was going throughout the experience there, was, wow, how do they enable this many people to run such a chaotic experience so efficiently and so organized? The other interesting thing that you'll notice at Disneyland is everybody can help you. So if you're asking the person who's cleaning the street what time the parade starts, they'll be able to tell you. If you are getting an ice cream served to you and you want to know the shortest route to a specific attraction, that person will be able to help you. And it adds to the whole experience because you start to feel that everyone who works there is there for you. But with all that being said, I was sitting with my kids on the Little Mermaid ride, and we're going through, and we've got all the different, at each point in the ride it stops, and there's like a little section where a different robot from the a different robot from the show kind of runs a little performance. And so we were just passing the Ariel performance, and she's singing her song, and suddenly the ride stops. There was a glitch and breaks. But instead of all the lights coming on and a voice coming over the PA saying the ride's broken, we're getting it fixed, the show carried on. And Sebastian the Crab's voice came over these loudspeakers saying, I'm not going to imitate it, I'm resisting the urge. But basically, hey, everybody, it looks like there's been a rock fall or something under the sea. The fish are fixing the ride. We're going to be with you, hold on to your barnacles, or whatever he says. And they do it on purpose so that you're staying in, because the second, if the lights came on and the PA announcement came on, you would lose all the magic. And I think that if you look at Disney, none of that happens by mistake. The more I've spent learning about how to lead people, the more I've realized that education is way more powerful than training. So I wanted to just kind of sound out a few different ways in which they differ, and that might help you kind of understand the difference between the two. The first one is that education really is about changing the culture of a company versus changing a process, right? Which is what training is about. So if I want my SDR team to be prepared for a specific campaign, the meetings are going to be booked for this specific AE, or this is the new way that we'd like you to, follow, and this is a new process that we'd like you to follow. This is a new method that we'd like you to do. That requires training. Okay. But if I want to create a situation where when we hire SDRs and we place them at companies, that they're able to think for themselves, or understand that it's okay to ask questions, or build connections with people at our clients' companies, so that they're able to represent them better. That requires education. And in order to do that, you actually have to change the entire culture of your company. Because if your company culture doesn't encourage those key elements, which we'll go through shortly, it's going to be very, very hard to deploy it. The other one is just in terms of the focus. Training is a limited focus. For example, if you're training for a sports event, okay, let's say you're training for sprinting. Okay, if you're training for sprinting, it's not going to necessarily carry over to swimming. Okay, but education is a much broader focus. Education is about giving you the tools, let's say, to be fit. So you might be, right, you might be easily able to adapt into a number of different sports if I, ensure that you were flexible and strong and agile. Okay. The last part is, I think this goes without saying, is education is a long-term investment. Training can be a one-time thing. Training can be a 10-minute. Training can be even a video recording. Whereas education requires both a investment in the upfront and a continuous investment that continues on. With that being said, I don't know, Bree, if you have this or not, or if you've run the poll or not, but we were asked who should run education programs. So I wonder if we've got the poll questions here. Okay, who should run education programs? We've got here the option high-performing SDRs, sales managers, SDR team leaders, SDR directors, and sales enablement. So pick your votes, and I guess we'll get that at the end. Okay, let me just hide this chat out the way. Okay, so those are some of the key parts when it comes to education. Biggest keys to success in making education work. Number one, you need to hire people who actually want to grow. I think that's the part that we forget. We put a lot of emphasis on the actual company providing the environment for growth, and that's obviously very important. But the other is the individual responsibility. If you're hiring people that one of the key criteria of their role is not that they want to grow as a person in that role, that's not one of the main reasons why they pick that role, you're going to come against a lot of resistance, and it's going to be very, very difficult. Sorry. Got an audio issue here. Okay, better. Yeah, you need to hire people that want to grow, that want to be a part of it, because if they don't, you're going to come up against a lot of obstacles. Number two, you need to invest in learning. And that means both in terms of finances and time. There's no other way around it. I'd love for there to be a more profitable way around it, but that's the bottom line. We've got to actually put in the time and the resources to make things work. Number three, you've got to have a collaborative culture. And that means that you've got to have an environment where the education and the learning is not only top down. I can put out there all sorts of ideas to my team, and I can share all sorts of resources, and that will work pretty well. But in the last week, we ran a session. We had a offsite, and we ran a session. We had our top SDRs each run a different session on areas that they were already strong in. So we had our outbound specialists, our LinkedIn specialists, even those that had the best communications with their clients. And we had them share with the rest of the company, like, what's their secret sauce? Firstly, I learned a lot that I didn't know. And secondly, their peers could relate to it much more because these are people that are doing the same job as you. And if you think to any role that you've had, you'll always pay much more attention to your peer and ask them questions about the role over, let's say, a senior leader, because it's someone you can relate to and you can ask lots of questions from. So just looking at Whistle, one of the things that we try to push is that collaborative culture and try to share that, everybody has something to teach, and it's important to kind of, share best practice. If you've got something that's working for you, share it. The fourth one is that it kind of links with the first, but you have to show paths for growth. If you don't show an individual a path where they can grow, then they will never wish to learn anything or be educated, because the whole point of it, at least professionally, right, is for them to grow. So in order for education to really work, your team need to understand what kind of benefit they're going to get out of investing on their side all that time and effort. And that's an important part as a leader. Whenever you're building out any sort of educational learning program, you're trying to create that culture for people to participate in, you need to be able to give them an avenue for growth. Okay, Nick, so everyone's heard me enough for the last couple of minutes, and I will now hand over the mic to you. I'd love for you to introduce yourself and take it from here. Do you want me to click through, by the way?
Yeah, that'd be very helpful.
I've done a decent job till now, so I'll keep it.
No, you're doing great. So yeah, my name is Nick Sproul. I head up sales development operations here at Second Nature. So I oversee our SDR team, our SDR function, as well as kind of our sales and marketing technologies. Yeah, here at Second Nature, yeah, we're helping people have better conversation, particularly in sales, using AI-driven role play. We help sales reps of companies of all shapes and sizes, giving you that safe space to practice with an AI persona. Her name is Jenny, which you'll learn about later. So next slide.
Click.
Yeah, so kind of going back to this training and education thing that David touched on. So typically, yeah, we have a problem with that traditional training or that traditional onboarding process. It tends to not be engaging either. It's going to be on a Zoom meeting after Zoom meeting, or you're going to be stuck in a conference room, which kind of leads into that next point of information overload, having to learn all the different products, talk tracks, as well as kind of learning the technologies that you have to leverage. And typically with traditional training, there's no way to track like its effectiveness from all the way from hire to maybe day 90 when they're fully ramped. And kind of how do you scale that talk track for multiple products and personas over time? Yeah, so here at Second Nature, we really have that culture of learning and wanting to kind of learn more. Yeah, so it's both for those ongoing learning opportunities, but also timely and interactive trainings. So from onboarding to fully ramped, kind of like I mentioned, yeah, you want to create that culture of learning. And one of my biggest things is instilling ownership of the training in each individual team member. Luckily here at Second Nature, we can leverage our own product, and you can actually schedule time with Jenny, and it'll actually send you a meeting notification to your email, so you can have that kind of set aside each and every day. So one thing we like to do is kind of gamify it a little bit. So getting that top score, doing as many trainings as possible to really make sure that you can become that A player, that you're at the top of your game, and definitely leveraging all the technology at your disposal, whether you're using one tool, two tools, or 10 tools. you definitely want to leverage that. So what does that look like here? Kind of like I mentioned, yeah, we can schedule time with her, but also as a leader, learn what drives your team as well. And if you're an SDR, learn what kind of drives your teammates so you can learn from them and learn how best to kind of work alongside them. You definitely want to have a process in place, kind of going back to that culture of education. One thing we like to do here is kind of setting that time aside. So setting aside 30 minutes every day to either learn from others out there on LinkedIn, tune into webinars like this, or getting into your LMS or whatever you're leveraging for training. Me personally, I like to get in the trenches with the team, making calls, learning kind of objections from our personas that we're calling into, so I can help the team, and I like to learn from them as well. And yeah, always learn ways in which you can empower your team. I like to always know kind of where they see themselves in a year from now. Yeah, so we like to have fun. We gamify it. So we have leaderboards based on how well we're doing with our training with Jenny. And we can see kind of over time how we're progressing with our scores, and if we have the right talk track, and it makes it fun. So yeah, we really enjoy it. Yeah, so this is Jenny. She's our AI persona, sales coach. Like I mentioned, she's pretty funny. She actually has her own LinkedIn presence and profile. She posts, she comments. She can be kind of witty. We'll post her LinkedIn profile in the chat so you can connect with her on LinkedIn as well. And yeah, so as an exclusive kind of offer for everybody here, we've created a cold call training, particularly around that idea of personalization. We hear it all the time about you need to be personalized when you're reaching out to people, make sure that the messaging is strictly for them. So it's about a 30-minute course, teach you everything from how you engage a prospect, how you want to structure that call, and with the end goal of obviously booking that meeting. And so the link will be there. We'll also post it in the chat as well.
Okay, awesome. So thanks, Nick. It looks like we kind of have similar ways of thinking, so that gives me some confidence that I must be on the right route. Let's talk about the SDR cheat code. So, you know, the big question that's always out there, and if you're on LinkedIn and you're in sales, or if you're an SDR, then you're going to see this kind of advice almost daily, right? What are the best things that SDRs can do? What do they do differently? So speaking to a lot of you guys and girls out there who are managers and leaders in companies, wanted to kind of share some best practice ideas that you can take on board. Number one, I think that there's a couple of key elements that will help you identify the SDR personas and the individuals that already going to stand out already, the ones that have those key ingredients that you can build on and that are already going to be rock star performers, so long as they have the enablement and the resources. Number one, they actually invest time. And I've never met a person who's brilliant at what they're doing and doesn't invest time over and above the norm in learning and mastering that craft. It doesn't matter if we're talking about sports or professional life. There is no other way really but to put in that time. And you'll notice that your top performing SDRs are usually also going to be the people that are actively spending time, as you know, signing up to webinars or reading materials or signing up to courses that are going to take them further without any prompting, or even sometimes investing their own money in that as well. Number two is resourceful. The best SDRs know how to find and use the resources around them to achieve their goals. That can also be internal. So for example, at Whistle, we've got 4 relatively distinct departments that face customers. One of them is the SDR department. The other is marketing that writes content. We've got a data team that builds lists. and an operations team that sets up RevOps for companies. And the best SDRs understand that they could actually leverage any of those teams to support them in what they're doing. So they could work with the data team to get live enrichment on leads that have come inbound that they don't have data for, or work with the marketing team to improve some of the messaging or get some assets, or the operations team to prioritize some of their time and attention over to them. And I think that that's also really important, is that you don't have to necessarily do it all on your own. And so the best SDRs understand that and do that. The third one obviously is attitude. You can't really get far without, with a bad attitude. And the more people that we've hired and the more times that I've led people, the more I realize how important an ingredient this is. It's hard to kind of tell exactly what that is. It's kind of like a mixture between positivity, grit, self-determination, can-do attitude. It's that energy. And the right kind of people have it. Now you can foster the right or the wrong attitude by leading wrong, but I think that that's a core ingredient coming in. Finally, support, right? So the best SDRs, the ones that perform better, even on an individual basis, are also usually the people that are supporting others and bringing them up. Those are the people that are super easy to promote within your company. And I often tell my team, the best way to get promoted is to start doing the job that you want to get promoted for. And that way you make it to the shortlist, right? So our first team leaders were SDRs that were always helping out their fellow SDRs. And so when the opportunity opened up for a team leader, that was, very obvious. Our first ops people were SDRs that were tinkering with systems, and turns out they had a great technical mind and strong background, and that helped. So I think the best SDRs really do that and support them, and that's one of the kind of key elements as far as the personal ingredients to becoming a top SDR. But Nick, you've obviously got a different take, or maybe you don't. Maybe you have a couple of the same. But just jumping over to you, what's your take? How did they become a quota crushing machine?
Yeah, thanks, David. I think we definitely kind of think along the same lines. So yeah, basically, how to become that quota crushing machine? How do you become that A player? So I think the biggest thing is that you want to, as an SDR, invest in your growth. You're really only going to get kind of what you put in. So one thing that we like to do is kind of talk about, especially with Second Nature, being able to become confident and competent at the same time when it comes to when you're talking about kind of working with prospects and really kind of having those daily conversations. So there's all these different things that you kind of have to balance. It's like you've got a product, you've got to work on your messaging. Could be new market, new methodologies, and you want to become kind of the A player. So kind of these four things: being intentional, like I mentioned before, setting aside that focus time where you're learning from other SDRs, SDR leaders such as ourselves, watching webinars like we are today, just kind of going through your feed, connecting with other SDRs or SDR managers out there on LinkedIn and learning from them. Being curious, leveraging. I'm a big sales tech kind of nerd, so I'm always leveraging technology in my kind of daily processes, looking for new tools that can make us work smarter, not harder. And definitely getting involved in communities such as RevGenius is a great one. Learning from your teammates and talking things out with your manager, even the littlest things that could come up in your day-to-day. So I always talk about being tenacious, going the extra mile. You could make 100 dials, and that 101st call at 4:59 p.m. Could be the one that you book a meeting. But yeah, kind of once you book that meeting, get right back to it. We kind of talk about this idea of being a hunter. So are you a spear hunter? You're going to go for the kill, try and get that meeting, or are you going to be a net fisherman and like try and cast a wide net? So we talk about, yeah, you definitely want to be that spear hunter. And kind of lastly, being approachable, lean on your fellow SDRs, share anything and everything that is working or isn't, or things that you're struggling with. And kind of most importantly, you definitely want to have fun.
Nick, questions that came up, they're both kind of linked, so I'm going to throw them in together. One is, why would you invest so much into training instead of just hiring experienced SDRs? And number two is it even worth investing in SDR education considering their life cycle? What's your take?
The first one, I actually have a lot of experience with this one. When I first became an SDR leader about 2 years ago, I was only looking like for experienced people. Like I just wanted experience. I wanted people that I knew could do the job. But over time, I've kind of learned if you have some of these traits that I kind of mentioned, if you have that curiosity, if you're tenacious, if you're willing to go the extra mile, you don't necessarily have to have SDR or even tech sales experience. Two of the three ladies on my team had no previous tech sales experience. Now they had sales experience from like the insurance industry. But for me, what's important is that I like to have at least one senior person that's been doing it for a while, because they can help the team, those new teammates that might be new SDRs, really know kind of what it takes. Yeah, so I've had a lot of success with hiring people without that quote unquote experience.
What's your take on the life cycle question about like, is it even worth it considering, I think I saw a stat out there that the average SDR, at least in SaaS, is hanging in there for 6 to 12 months max. Do you think that hampers on whether, it's worth investing in education?
I mean, it's definitely worth investing in education because you're helping them grow, whether they go on to become an AE, maybe they want to become a CSM, or maybe they want to go into marketing, or maybe they want to become an SDR manager. All those things with education and training kind of lead them up to that point. So that's why I like to understand like their career path, like pretty much from like day one. Now on day one, they might not know yet, but I'm always having those open conversations so that way I can help them get to where they want to go. What's your take on that, David?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I don't know where you started in sales, but I started as an SDR. I think the final evolution of my role, at least here at Whistle, will be as an SDR, right? Because as soon as everything's outsourced to different key players within my company, as soon as all the functions are being run independent of me, my main job as a CEO is advocating, right? So I think it's a great training ground. I think that if your goal is to become an entrepreneur at the end of the day, SDR is the core skill to get started. And that's the hardest part, is getting anything started. So personally, and I've seen it now dozens of times in our company. We've grown very fast from 2 people to 80 people in about 2 years. And the only way to do that is by investing in people, taking big bets on them and giving them those paths for growth. And I've never been disappointed when I've done that. And I've done, thankfully I've been in a position to do that a number of times. I've never had somebody who I gave a chance to and gave the resources that they needed to disappoint me. And so, yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Another question that's just come up is spend. How much does the company spend on education? I actually saw a stat not too long ago. It was from Training Industry, and it said that their average company is spending about $1,071 on training, and apparently that's $40 less than in 2020. So that was 2021. So I wonder if, and I wonder if this is linked to anything, maybe with what's going on economically. But have you got a take on that, Nick, in terms of company investment in training? How much is too much? Is there a budget? Do you guys have a budget for training and education? What does that look like?
Yeah, I think there's kind of a variety of factors. It's kind of how big is your team? When I look at kind of training tools, or actually any kind of sales tools, does it fit in with like our flow of work? So like, can it integrate with the systems that we're using? If we're using LMS, or can it integrate with our CRM? Yeah, I don't think you can put like a firm number on it. And also it depends on, especially for the SDRs, like when they're sourcing those meetings and generating those deals, what are those deal sizes? Because then that'll determine like how much more kind of capital you can put towards that. But I think kind of training tends to be like the last thing they look at, especially for SDR teams, because they just want them to like, oh, they should just be focused on like calling and doing all that. But I think there is some value in investing in training, kind of as we've kind of hit on today.
Yep. It's like that, sharpen the axe, right? If you have to chop the trees, spend some more time sharpening the axe. Okay, back to you, Nick. What's your take? Pull those levers.
Yeah. So I'm always talking to my team about being consistent with your daily activity numbers. Because if you're kind of all over the place, and you're not at your quota number, like you don't know like where you're really having success or where you might be struggling. So let's just say you're averaging 100 activities and you kind of average that for the entire month. And let's just say you only get to like 75% of your number. So you can say, okay, well, you had a lot of success. You booked 6 out of your 8 meetings from phone calls. Maybe we should leverage calling a little bit more. Or if it's on social, like doing some more kind of LinkedIn steps and really kind of putting our eggs into that basket. So yeah, that's kind of what I preach. And I actually learned that from Beck Holland, if anyone's familiar with her, where she talks about kind of the math of personalization, the math of like an SDR's day. And then you can kind of move things around to kind of for things to kind of make sense and for you to get to those numbers that you're looking for. And then kind of that next point is practice definitely makes perfect. Kind of how we describe second nature is it's kind of like the batting practice before the game. Like people that play baseball, like they're not just gonna like just go into the game and start hitting home runs. Like they have to do the work. They have to hit all those hundreds of balls before the game or in practice. So from an SDR perspective, that could be role playing with your teammates, making calls together. But most importantly for us, it's, and with Second Nature, creating that safe space to practice our pitch and talk track. So not everybody likes to get in front of their peers and make cold calls. So it kind of gives you that safe space where you can work with Jenny and really perfect your talk track and learn kind of things that you might not be mentioning that you need to mention, and how you can kind of tweak your approach with prospects or customers.
And just to interject there, Nick, I mean, we're Second Nature customers, and the reason why we bought the platform and we put in that investment is specifically for that. So that, if you think about the math, right, the average SDR, let's say they make $100 a day. The average connection rate in SaaS at the moment is about 4%. So if you're only having 4 conversations a day, and you're hoping that connection rate's with the right person, right? But let's imagine, right, you have 4 conversations a day. How many times in a given week do you think that an SDR is going to get a specific objection, like a budget objection? It's maybe once a week if it's like, and are they going to be ready? So for that reason, I mean, when we built out Second Nature for Whistle, one of the big things was we mapped out the most common objections that an SDR will face. And now if you're rehearsing that day after day after day, and suddenly you get hit with like a budget objection, or I'm not the right person, or send me the email, any of those, instead of panicking, you'll always resort to the, you know, people don't necessarily, you know that saying, right? People don't necessarily rise to the occasion. They're going to resort to the level of their training. And I think that that's, you know, for us, a big part of it. And also face-to-face training, you can go so far. But when you've got that, you know, you've got, let's say, Jenny or whoever, there's a couple of other characters there, right? But if you've got an AI simulated space where you can just keep hitting, okay, let's go again, that changes the game. Okay, Nick, what's your take on investing now for tomorrow?
Yeah, kind of before we kind of get into that, I'd like just throw a poll out to, is everyone setting aside time every week to for education or professional development? So Bree, you want to throw that poll out there? Let's see what we got. Oh, so that's, yeah, great to see. It looks like about 75% of you are setting aside time for training, which is great. But yeah, now we'll kind of get into talking about that practice makes perfect, kind of gets into that today's work equals tomorrow's success. So kind of going back to the levers, managing your time to drive the right behaviors. So knowing what types of activities are leading to the most success, while also kind of leveraging training, setting that focus time aside to learn. There's actually a great app that one of my SDRs turned me on to, which is called Rescue Time. And based on your calendar, it'll actually like set like focus time blocks aside for you. And let's just say, like for us, we're leveraging SalesLoft as our outbound sales enablement platform or sales engagement platform. It'll only let you focus on like that website. So if you try to go to like anywhere else, like it'll say like you're in your focus time block and you can't go to this site. So it really just keeps you kind of laser focused on those focused time blocks. Yeah, definitely as an SDR leader, instilling in your team a culture of learning and excellence. In your as an SDR, definitely knowing kind of those successful activities, sharing your wins, maybe even sharing some of your losses, difficult calls too, because that's kind of how the team learns. One thing we've just started doing recently is actually when we get like a new objection, working with our product team to create simulations kind of around that, which can only help the team become that much more knowledgeable as we have future conversations.
Okay, so we also spoke kind of about, you had mentioned levers, right, that you can pull. And I think that activity is one that's often pulled, right? If SDR is a machine, the number one that the average manager is going to tell their team is, you know, work harder, make more dials, send more emails, make more connections. Another is obviously capacity. Okay, so you can add more to your team. Hey, you know, we have one full-time SDR doing X, let's get two and make it 2X. But there's another one, which is actually what they do, right? So you kind of touched on it as well, Nick, in terms of structuring the day. And I wanted to actually share something. So I'll pop out of this presentation for a second. Bear with me, guys. I want to show you a resource that we put together. I'm going to just share it here. It's part of a resource that we put together. So as I mentioned before, it's showing up on your side, right, Nick? The little Excel. Is it showing? Can everyone see? Let's see if it's working. Is that working for everybody? Not yet. Let's try again. Checking.
There we go.
Okay, there we go. All right. So turns out there's about 50 or so things that SDRs can do. Okay. And after running about 600 different campaigns, we actually mapped out the average contact to meeting rate per lead source. So for example, just as a rough guide, a live inbound demo request is going to convert at about a 50% rate, whereas a completely cold outbound lead is about 2%. And what I mean by that is a lot of the time companies will focus on how many dials, how many emails are you sending, how long is your cadence, how many contacts are you reaching out to on LinkedIn, how many posts are you putting up. Those activity metrics are usually the wrong metrics. Those are vanity metrics. They don't matter as much. What matters, they do matter, but they're not the end goal, right? What matters is the quality of work that you put out. And as a leader, you can influence that heavily. So what we use as a kind of a key tracking metric is what we call the contact to meeting rate. In other words, an average SDR will work through about 500 contacts a month. So knowing that, where am I going to prioritize their time and attention and activity? Well, I'm going to kind of skew most of their time, attention, activity to the leads that are going to result in the highest chance of becoming a customer, right? So if, for example, I have 100 leads a month coming through demo request, that would be, a priority number one. Whereas if I also want them to do some outbound, okay, the other 400 might come from there. Okay, and the mix, the mix is all across. But the idea is basically that I'll jump back to the slides. But the idea is basically that where you focus the SDR attention and activity drastically impacts on their ability to kind of hit their targets and hit their numbers. And as a leader, you have that ability to do it, right? You can work with, let's say, the marketing teams or the sales teams, get the feedback, get the leads diverted to increase the amount of activity. And I think that's one of the key cheat codes, something that I often have to discuss with companies, and it's like the first time they've heard about it, which is, well, if you're trying to increase results, are you prioritizing the lead sources? Are you giving them the best possible leads? And that's, I think, super important to the cheat code. Now, your numbers may differ, and I think that any company out there should be looking at all the different lead sources they're getting and skewing at that attention and the time and the focus to the ones that convert the most. It's one of the simple things that's often ignored and makes the biggest difference. I kind of spoke about, those daily habits Nick mentioned as well. They drive success, right? And activity is important, but it's not the main thing. Ultimately, we're all trying to set up, at least as SDRs, qualified meetings at volume. As company owners, we want more sales, right? But the goal of an SDR manager is not necessarily to increase their activities and even outputs if you're measuring that as a result of work, but it's about making sure your SDR teams are as efficient as possible. And so they're really getting the most out of the time that they're putting in. We've actually got a question that just came through, which says, do you think having a senior SDR in an SDR team is not only important for learning, Nick, you better be remembering this, it's a long one, but important for growth as well? So do you think having a senior SDR in an SDR team is not only important for learning, but important for growth as well? As a junior SDR, where did it go? As a junior SDR, it would be a decent short to medium term goal to achieve becoming a senior SDR. What's your take? Do you think having a senior SDR and an SDR team is important for learning and growth?
Yeah, I've always had kind of that senior SDR, and that's kind of how I progressed up as an SDR. Started as an SDR. After a year, then I became a senior SDR, which I think is important for where the AE might not be a goal for a new SDR, or it might not be possible. It kind of gives you that short-term ramp to like a different position. And obviously we all like money and we all like reaching that. So I think having that as like a mid-level kind of role that they can get to before they become an AE or maybe a CSM, I think is important, and it can give the others kind of that extra motivation to go that extra mile in order to become that senior kind of, or senior SDR or team lead, or yes, that's why I've always had kind of that senior SDR level on my teams.
Awesome. Yeah, that's it from us, right, Nick? Is there anything that we missed?
No, I think yeah, we pretty much covered everything. Yeah, we'd love to connect with you. Yeah, and we just have one more poll before we get going here. How is everyone being impacted by the economy? Is your team or are you personally feeling the effects of the economy right now? Because we know we see stuff about layoffs on a weekly basis now. But yeah, I'm curious to see, like, everyone on this call, if they're feeling the effects at all. So it looks like about 2/3 are. But yeah, in some of these things that we kind of talked about, kind of those cheat codes can definitely help you weather that a little bit. But also be at the top of your game, because you never know what objection you're going to come across. It's definitely getting harder to get in touch with our prospects and customers. So we have to be kind of at the top of our game kind of at all times.
Yeah, I think my take on it, specifically when it comes to tech roles, is a bit mixed. I don't know if it's the popular opinion or not, but I haven't come across, there's obviously a lot of layoffs, right, that have been going on the last few months. And that happened also in 2020, and that happens from time to time. But I haven't come across too many competent people that were out of work for more than, let's say, a month or two in tech. And I think that although there are fluctuations within individual companies all the time, as a whole, there's always another one, right, that's coming up and growing and rising. And I think that's why, to kind of tie this all up, that's why that education element is so important. Even as an individual, you owe it to yourself to put in that time to really maximize your own market value, because things do change, right? And you want to be in the strongest position possible to take advantage of that. Whistle as an agency was born out of COVID. It was born through that first shakeup of the economy. And that's where I realized, okay, I've got to build something here. And for us, this whole period has been a really strong period for us. But yeah, you've got to put in that effort and an investment in yourself. And if whether you do win or lose, the skills will pay dividends. Bree, do you want to kind of send us off? I know you had a couple of things you wanted to share.
I do. What great content that you provided, Nick and David. I think that there were so many great takeaways. For everyone who's watching, if you did not have a chance to click on the files that they shared with you, please reach out. Again, Bree at RevGenius.com. It's BRE. And I will make sure to email those over to you. I want to thank our partner, Second Nature, with their co-host that they brought on to share as one of their partners, Whistle, our client's Whistle, just to, really thank you for the content that you put out there. I think it was very informative. We had a great turnout. And, if there are any additional questions or needs, everyone in the audience, please feel free to reach out. But again, a big thank you.
Awesome.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Bree, and thanks, David.
Thanks, everybody. That was great.
Have a great day.
All right, bye-bye.